Gobbet looks up from a dented tin of oysters at the sound of your approach. Her rats, Madness and Folly, scurry from her hips up to her shoulders. Two sets of beady eyes fix themselves on you. Hey, Seattle. Oyster? She spears a gray lump of seafood with a fingernail, extends it to you. It smells like low tide at a municipal pier. Sure, why not? You pop the rubbery wad of flesh into your mouth and chew. An explosion of lukewarm brine is your reward. Good, right? Half-repressed memories of dumpster diving in the Barrens dance a merry jig in your brain as the mangled oyster slides down your throat. I've eaten worse. Exactly, right? It may not be fine dining, but it's seafood and it isn't made of soy. That makes it good in my book. She tilts back the tin, drains the remaining juice, and then flicks it into the overflowing bin at her side. So, what can I do for you? So how do you like life here on the bolt hole? It's fine. Shaping up. Having new roomies is always nice. She smiles. How are you enjoying your cabin? Comfy enough for you? It isn't half bad. Better than some of the places I squatted in back in the Barrens. I've heard stories about the Redmond Barrens. Sounds like a real winner of a place. Kowloon isn't any better, of course, but at least our little slice of home is safe. I'll take the bolt hole over the Barrens any day. That's the spirit. A lazy smile spreads across her face as her fingertips brush Madness's back. The rat squeals and darts back into the safe haven of Gobbet's hair. Any thoughts about that last run? I don't get the wampum ones, I really don't. Isabella's about as close as I usually get to their particular flavor of crazy. You'd think with all that technology and backup, they'd have been smart enough not to stiff a red samurai on payment, much less a ghoul. I don't know, for smart people, they seem pretty damn dumb to me. I think we pulled off a damn miracle back there. Not only did we get a creepy-ass close combat expert on our side, we exposed the elders and got ourselves a nice bonus for being smart. Not a lot of jobs go that right. I'm feeling better and better about having you in charge, Seattle. You said that you teach me how to be a better Shadowrunner. I'm here to collect. Still remember that, do you? Huh. I just sort of assumed that you'd laugh that off. No dice, wizened mentor. You offered. Now pay up. She straightens. Okay. How about this? I'll tell you a story about a run gone bad. You tell me what you'd have done in the runner's place, and then we'll compare notes on your answer. How does that sound? You tell me. You're the leader. You're the teacher here, remember? Right. It sounds good. Of course it does. So that's what we'll do. She sweeps a tangled rope of hair out of her eyes and back over one pointed ear. After a moment of silent contemplation, she bites her lip and nods. Okay, so this is a story from early in my career. I was part of a team here in HK, but I did some occasional moonlighting for another group based out of Macau. I was a busy kid. Early in your career? So you were, what, like 12 years old? Her eyes narrow in mock indignation. You say that like I couldn't have been. When I was 12, I could have destroyed you. And also, I was 16. Practically an adult in orc years. We grow up fast. Anyway, the job was a hit on this tower. Sort of a trade multiplex / apartment complex. I'm sure that they've got them in Seattle too. You know the kind. 7 huge screens, monster concession stand, coffin apartments on top like barnacles on a whale. I lived in one for a while. Every time they showed an action movie, the walls would shake. She nods. Yeah, that'll happen. Our client wanted us to break into one of the apartments. The story was that an ex of hers, a guy named Boggs, lived there. She'd been cooped up with him until about a week prior, then things went sour in a big way. She wanted us to get back some things that Boggs kept when he kicked her out. Scare the shit out of him, bloody him up a bit, make it look like a robbery. You know the drill. Sounds more like a job for thrill gangers than full-fledged Shadowrunners. Yeah, it was a pretty bush league gig, but the pay was decent enough. Not the sort of thing you'd turn down. So anyway, Sibilance, that was our group leader, had a plan. We knew that we had to go in quiet because the Metroplex had a panic system wired directly to the HKPF. If we'd gone in shooting, we'd have been drowning in cops within 10 minutes. Sib thought that we could maybe take advantage of the apartment's terrible soundproofing and kick in Boggs' door when the movie got loud. We'd camp out near his doorway, wait for the ceiling to start raining plaster, then smash our way in with his neighbors none the wiser. There's no way that would work. I don't know, it might have if things had gone different, but it's what we did, so pipe down and let me tell you the rest of the story. So we waited in the hall, just like Sibilance planned. We had a guy in the elevator, another at the stairs. I was waiting by the floor's communal kitchen. Sib took up a position by the door. She had these cyber legs that she dumped a ton of new yen into. Hydraulic jack, strength enhancements, the works. Girl could probably leg press a dump truck. She pauses for a moment. Come to think of it, most of her plans involve kicking things. There's something a little sad about that. Hey, if that was her thing, I wouldn't question it. Yeah, you're very supportive. Me, I'd have preferred to work for someone who thought with her head instead of her robot legs. Anyway, we heard a boom from downstairs. Felt the walls shake with the reverb. Sib wheeled back and gave the door a massive kick, just as she'd planned. From where I was standing, I couldn't really see what happened next. I could hear a massive crack as her boot slammed into Duraplast. The door flew off its hinges. Exploded off might be a more accurate phrase. A second later, we heard an ungodly crash. There was a moment of silence. Then Sib let out this little gasp. The apartment was in shambles. It looked like a hurricane had hit it. Everything was trashed, everything but the door, which was miraculously still in one piece. Remember that this was a coffin apartment. It wasn't much wider than the door was to begin with, and Boggs, well, what was left of him was under the door too. Well, you got the rough him up part, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, he wound up a lot rougher than he was supposed to be. Her nose crinkles in discomfort. That door really did a number on him. Ribs sticking out of the skin, that kind of thing. It was a bloody mess. So, yeah, Boggs was dead. The stuff that we'd been sent to the apartment to recover had been smashed to bits. And then the building alarm went off. So that's the situation. Our payday is smashed. My temporary teammates are all standing around with stupid looks on their faces. The cops are coming. I'm standing by the kitchen. She plants her hands on her hips, smiling. What would you have done in my place? I'd have tried to improvise. Was there anything in the kitchen that you could use to resolve the situation? Good thinking. As it happens, there was, and I knew just what to do with it. The thought popped into my head, and I just went with it. She taps her temple with a smile. That's a lesson to remember, Seattle. The first answer that you come up with is almost always the best one you're gonna have, so just roll with it. Don't second guess yourself, don't hesitate, just act. You'll live longer that way. Got it. Now, when I think crowded theater, I think place where you can't shout fire because it'll cause a panic. And then I thought, cops don't charge into burning buildings, they help people get out of them. And as it happened, I had the means to create a real, genuine fire sitting right across from me. A pair of industrial ovens. Yeah, sure. Makes sense to me, I guess. Right? It was clearly the best available option. I opened the gas vents wide, set the range on a timer, and motored back into the hallway. The others had started arguing amongst themselves. I told them to snap out of it and follow me down into the lobby. We have to clear the hallway before an errant spark takes the whole floor out, I said. Sounded pretty reasonable to me. Unfortunately, the rest of the group wouldn't listen. Sib and the rest of the team were too busy arguing about the relative merits of her let's kick things really hard and see what happens tactical system to want anything to do with me. I shouted back to them that the kitchen was going to explode and continued down the hallway. Just like I'd planned, I got out of that run in one piece. So did every single one of the people in that multiplex. My fire plan worked beautifully. If the rest of the team had listened to me, they might have gotten out of the building too. Kind of a bummer that they didn't, but at least the run turned out well for me. All's well that ends well, I guess. That's right. You take what you're given and make the best of it, and that's what I did. I couldn't collect any pay, of course. The run had been a disaster, but after the explosion, I got to ride in front of the fire truck, and they gave me cookies and a blanket. I wound up dating one of those firemen a few weeks later, so it all worked out in the end. Gobbit claps her hands together and rubs them, a satisfied look on her face. So, Seattle. Laughter disappears from her voice, and her expression goes serious. It's like somebody flipped a switch. Suddenly, the look in her eyes is shrewd, calculating. Tell me, what was the moral of this story? What lesson was I trying to convey? Go with your gut, I guess? She nods sagely. That's right. Trust your impulses and don't be afraid to wing it. Almost any action is better than no action at all. Once you've committed to doing something, you've got to follow it through, though. No arguing or hand-wringing, just do it. If you get caught up in your own head, agonizing over past mistakes, well, don't be surprised if you wind up dead. A kitchen fire can take you down as easily as a cop's bullet if you stand around and let it. Are you certain that Sibilance and the rest of the Macau team are dead? She shrugs. They weren't with me when I got evacuated and with the rest of the moviegoers. I never saw them leave the building, and I haven't heard from them since. I guess it's possible that somebody made it, but I don't really run in those circles anymore. Odds are good that if anyone from the Macau team did survive, they'll have died off by now from sheer incompetence. Shadowrunning is an unforgiving business. You don't get to make too many mistakes. Did any of the stuff in that story actually happen, or did you just make it up for my benefit? Seattle, I'm hurt. It all went down exactly like I said it did. She pauses. Well, except for a couple of embellishments here and there, but they make it a better story. Artistic license and all that. Gobbet leans back and stifles a yawn. Mendes and Folly dart up to her left shoulder and lock their beady eyes on you. Hate to break it to you, kiddo, but I'm beat. It's been a long day. Lesson's over for now. We'll pick it back up next time. Alright, Gobbet, I'll catch you next time. Yeah, sounds good. I'll have your next lesson ready and waiting, too. She makes a brushing motion with her fingers. Scurry along now. Your mentor needs her rest. God, I love Gobbet so much. She's so good. She's so, like, the perfect amount of, like, gremlin. She's, like, just gremlin enough to be my direct offspring, I think. Gobbet is my daughter. I love Gobbet. Ractor's shop is sweltering hot, even more so than it was the first time you stepped inside. The whir of actuators accompanies the fine motions of the manipulator arms that hang from the ceiling. They are turning an object over and over in their articulated hands, soldering wires and hammering rivets. Ah, my friend, welcome back. Ractor touch types a series of commands into his bracer, and the arms relax into an idle posture. He smiles at you, a cigarette dangling from his lip. There, that's better. Now, what can I do for you? How are you getting along with the other members of the team? Perfectly well, thank you. They all seem competent enough, and there haven't been any major personality conflicts so far. He rubs his chin thoughtfully. So long as they continue performing to an acceptable standard, I can see no reason not to continue our arrangement. It's good to run with a team again. If anything changes, let me know. It's important that the team's morale stays high. He raises a finger. You don't manage morale, my friend. You manage the team. So long as we continue to succeed, morale will take care of itself. You're still something of a mystery to the group, Ractor. Mind if I ask you a few questions? No, I don't mind. Not at all. He takes a drag on his cigarette and slowly releases the smoke. I can't promise that my answers will satisfy your curiosity, of course, but you may certainly ask. What was it like growing up in the Russian Republic? Tumultuous, as you might expect. You probably aren't old enough to remember the Euro Wars, but I am. I'd like to hear about them. My country was the instigator of the first Euro War back in 2030. I remember the rhetoric, the hardships of living under a wartime economy, the rampant xenophobia that took hold. I remember how we all cheered when our forces invaded Poland. 3 months. That was all that it took for our military to crush what meager resistance the Poles could bring to bear. It was quite the source of national pride back home. I remember our drive into Germany and the desperate bid to reclaim the eastern portion of that country for ourselves. Just think about the symbolic significance of such an act. An audacious move, to be sure, but Secretary Kropotkin was determined to make history. Yeah, in the same way that Stalin was. I believe that Kropotkin was more concerned with the opinions of his own people than he was with his place in the history books. And in truth, I cannot fault him for this. For the 4 months that the war lasted, he did bring the country together. But, alas, the Night Wraith incident put an end to our march and sent our forces into full retreat. Night Wraith? British-made fighter bombers with stealth capabilities. Very state-of-the-art, very powerful. At least, that's what they were purported to have been. Nobody has ever come forward to accept responsibility for the attack. So, little lore thing that I want to point out here that I think is very interesting is that Ractor is completely right. Nobody knows the source of the stealth bombers that put an end to the Euro War. However, there is a theory that it was the work of dragons. Because dragons in the Shadowrun universe are... They like to hoard very much in, you know, classic dragon style. But they hoard more than just wealth. They hoard power and people and respect and, like, you know, power. Generally, dragons want power. So it is theorized that the Night Wraiths, quote unquote, that people saw that put an end to the Euro Wars were actually dragons that had come and swooped in to put an end to the Euro War because it was not convenient to their accumulation of resources and power. That theory is considered a little bit tinfoil hat because people are fairly certain that they saw bombers and not dragons. Slightly less tinfoil hat is that dragons funded the Night Wraiths to come in and drop bombs and end the Euro War, which is reasonable to believe because in this universe, dragons are sort of a metaphor for billionaires. So, you know, fun little fact.
Regardless of who was behind it, the result was the same. Wave upon wave of bombings that targeted our forces and the Germans alike, coupled with the assassinations of dozens of military leaders. A devastating synchronized operation expertly carried out over the course of a single night.
Also important to note that it's widely believed that dragons would be the only ones capable of performing such a task. Because, like, it's very synchronized. It's very, very powerful. They assassinated dozens of military leaders. And, like, that would be very difficult to do all at once, right? So, it's reasonable to assume, or even posit, that certain people who have accumulated a lot of resources and power would be capable of performing this task.
At home, viral attacks shut down our power grids. Hundreds of thousands of Russian homes found themselves without heat or electricity in the dead of winter.
Koshei scuttles forward, allowing the rigger to rest his hand on the sloping metal of its chassis. Ractor stares at his own deformed reflection in the metal of the drone's body, a sad smile on his face.
I remember huddling under a mountain of cheap blankets that my mother had piled upon my bed. They did little to protect me from the cold, but there was something that I could hang on to, something tangible that I associated with warmth and comfort and home. There, as my body trembled and I watched my breath frost over, a horrible truth descended upon me. We had caused this. We were the villains of the First Euro War. For the first time, I came face to face with what Kropunen's folly had bought us, and there, under that ridiculous heap of rags, I came to realize what would surely come to pass. The world thought us villains, and so they would treat us like villains. We would be pariahs on the international stage, crippled by retributive sanctions. We would never live down the shame.
He wipes his hands as if cleaning them. A wry smile spreads across his face.
And then the AFA invaded Greece and Spain, sparking off Euro War II. We redeployed our troops to help repel them, and all was made right again.
I have to imagine that you still had enemies in Poland and Germany, even after the start of the Second War.
Oh, we were still regarded with suspicion, of course, but all of Europe might have fallen if it hadn't been for our help. In essence, we took back our reputation at gunpoint. Not an ideal solution, I admit, but it worked. Within the span of 4 months, we Russians had gone from nobodies to a terrible threat to unlikely saviors in the eyes of the Western world. Studying exactly how this happened has taught me a great deal about human psychology and social dynamics.
Human psychology? You say that as if you weren't one.
He laughs. Just a figure of speech, my friend, nothing more. Now, shall we talk about something else? Surely there are more interesting and relevant things to discuss.
You mentioned that the Second Euro War was sparked off by the AFA. Who were they? He takes a drag on his cigarette.
Ah, yes. I suppose that you wouldn't know. They were only active for the years surrounding the conflict, after all. The AFA was the Alliance for Allah, serving under Mullah Saeed Jazrir, the coalition of right-wing Middle Eastern governments that assembled under the failure, some say sabotage, of the United Islamic Conference. They looked to a weakened Europe and saw an opportunity, one that my country was entirely responsible for creating.
That probably shouldn't have come as a surprise.
You're right, of course. We should have foreseen that weakening Europe's defenses would open the doors to outside aggression. Ultimately, the AFA did what any hawkish power would have done in their position. Given their circumstances, they would have been foolish not to.
So, what happened? How did the war end?
The AFA folded in 2037 after Jaws Rear's assassination. A lucky thing for us too, the body count could have been a great deal higher. In the years that they were active, the AFA gave us a hell of a fight.
Did you emigrate directly from Russia to Hong Kong?
No! Between my years in Nizhny Novgorod and my time here in Huoi, I spent a year in the free city of Berlin. That was where I got my feet wet as a Shadowrunner, you see. I ran with a team of anarchists for a time and learned the ropes of the occupation under their tutelage.
Anarchists, huh? Must have been interesting. He shrugs.
It was, to a point. They were disorganized, but but perfectly capable. We enjoyed a certain level of camaraderie while we ran together. Sadly, we are no longer on the best of terms.
What happened?
An opportunity arose and I seized it. In so doing, I left Berlin for Hong Kong, and I did so without much advance notice. My absence made life difficult for them, and they blamed me for their hardships.
You did what you had to do.
Yes, that's right. While my departure may have caused complications for my former teammates, it wasn't personal. I haven't lost any sleep over my decision. In my position, any of them would have done the same.
He looks away, a wistful expression on his face. Crochet scrapes the ground with its forelegs, its sensors fixed firmly on you.
Ultimately, I would say that my time in Berlin was quite educational, different from my earlier life in Russia, to be sure. As I said, the experience is invaluable. Ultimately, though, Huoi is better suited to my sensibilities.
I know what you mean. I like it here, too.
A good thing, considering your present situation. I get the impression that Duncan is less than thrilled to be stuck here. Still, it is good to hear that our community suits you.
Why did you move from Russia to Berlin? He holds his tongue for a moment, considering.
When we first met, I told you that I parted ways with Christian Aviacore under unfortunate circumstances, yes?
You mentioned it.
These same circumstances led me to Berlin. I was wronged, and I would not find recourse in Russia.
He sighs.
I suppose there's no sense in being vague. I'll tell you the story if you want to hear it.
Please, lay it on me.
You may remember the self-repair system I mentioned the first time we met. The module that would allow Crochet, or any sufficiently equipped drone, to repair itself. I told you that my research had been lost. That was not strictly true. It was stolen by a pair of colleagues who I had long considered friends. They were researchers from my old lab. They turned against me, stole our work, in truth, my work, and defected.
They betrayed you, huh?
Yes, driven by desperation, no doubt, and ambition. They'd always been fixated on getting out of Russia. Christian Aviacore was a nationalized corporation, and they would never get rich as cogs in a government-controlled machine. In our project, they saw their key to breaking away and earning their fortunes, never mind the fact that I was opposed to the idea, and so they took what was mine and left me with nothing.
And so you followed them, I take it?
Yes. The two had long spoken about moving to Berlin. Such was true of a great many academics in Russia. My homeland is a bureaucratic dictatorship, you see. There is little personal freedom, and there are many rules to be followed. As you might imagine, the stable anarchy of the flux state can be an alluring concept to those who live under totalitarian rule. Berlin is much romanticized back home.
So you assumed that your former colleagues had run to Berlin?
It was the only thing that I had to go on. At best, I would find them. At worst, it would be a good place to rebuild my life. And, of course, to establish the web of contacts that I'd need to track my betrayers down.
There was a squeal of tortured metal as Crochet drags its claws over the iron grating that covers the floor. Ractor glances down at the drone and it goes calm. He takes a deep breath and continues.
It took me over a year to locate my former friends. It was a long, painstaking search, but I was nothing if not determined. I finally found evidence that they'd used my research as a bargaining chip to secure positions at Ares, and that they were here in Hong Kong.
And so you came here to Huoi?
He nods. I picked up and left the next day. My old team was upset, to be sure. Lucky Strike in particular held for my blood, but I know where my priorities lie. And so, here I am, and here they are. And soon I will be ready to act.
So, like I said earlier, Lucky Strike is a character that you literally meet in Shadowrun Dragonfall. who very specifically complains about a member of her crew suddenly leaving and leaving her crew in a bad place. Nice little link there.
I really must thank you for inviting me into the team. Your abilities will be invaluable when the time finally comes to make my move. Assuming, of course, that you'd be willing to help?
Of course. When you're ready, just say the word.
Thank you, my friend. But this is a discussion for another day. We aren't ready to hit an Ares facility yet, and there is more intelligence to gather before we make our move anyway. When the time comes, I will let you know.
What can you tell me about the colleagues who stole your work?
Today, they call themselves Taylor and Hardingham.
He speaks through clenched teeth. Cochet drags a claw against the ground, and you can hear the squeal of metal on metal.
Those aren't their real names, obviously. They shed their former identities when they left their old lives behind.
What were they called when you worked with them back at Grisham Navia Corps?
It doesn't matter. Those men are as dead to me as they are to the world. My old colleagues no longer exist. Taylor and Hardingham are all that remained. They are targets now, nothing more.
He idly brushes Cochet's armored chassis with the fingertips of his right hand.
Oh, how wonderful it will be to find them. What a reunion we will have.
This stolen research means more to you than money, doesn't it? He nods his head.
Yes, much more. It was my life's work, and it was important. Reducing it to a bargaining chip was a deadly insult, both to me and to all those who would benefit from my work.
You say that with almost religious fervor. He snorts.
Religious? No. Religious superstition is a relic of the past. I welcome the future. A future that my research was intended to help usher in.
Superstition? You live in a boat with a pair of orcs, one of whom uses magic on a regular basis. He wags his finger at you.
You're putting words in my mouth. I never dismissed magic as a superstition. Magic is an observable, measurable phenomenon, as real as the laws of thermodynamics. What I said was that religion, in the classical model, is rooted in superstition. I stand by that analysis. Now tell me, my friend, are you familiar with the concept of transhumanism, the transformation of humanity as a species by technological means?
Sure. If I'm not mistaken, we are already living in a transhumanist present.
Yes, that's right. Transhumanism is no longer a philosophy, it is a fact. Look around you. Cybernetics are an important aspect of everyday life. Further, I would argue that the synthesis of man and machine is the crowning achievement of metahumanity as a people.
I'll go with you on that.
In such a future, the capacity for unlimited self-repair would be indistinguishable from immortality. You can see, then, why the theft of my research came as such a blow. My former colleagues hadn't just stolen from me. They had taken my contribution to the future of our species and reduced it to a bargaining chip.
Yeah, I get it. I'd be upset too.
I was more than upset, my friend. I was livid. I still am. But all will be made right in the fullness of time. I am nothing if not a patient man. I can wait.
He rises, brushes himself off.
And with that, I'm afraid that I'm going to have to bid you good night. I've taken enough of a break for one evening. There is some work to be done, and it would be lax of me to put it aside any longer.
Thanks, Raptor. It was interesting. He nods at you.
Good night.
Alright. And let's go check in and see how Gaichu is settling in. The storage room that functions as Gaichu's cabin is a cramped, overheated mess. Piles of old ship parts share space with tarnished cookware, flats of instant noodles, a collection of cast-off clothes, and reams of diagnostic manuals for obsolete computer hardware. To top it all off, there is barely any light whatsoever. All of the bulbs in this room are missing. Gaichu is busily moving boxes around, apparently in an effort to carve out some personal space amid the junk that he shares his cabin with. As you enter, he cocks his head and turns around.
Welcome to my sanctuary, Alley Cat. I apologize for the lack of light, but as I did not need it, Gobbet took the bulbs for use elsewhere.
Gaichu puts the box down that he's in the process of moving and politely bows his head toward you.
How can I be of assistance?
I just wanted to see how you were settling in. Gaichu rolls his shoulder in a diffident shrug.
I live. I am among those who can make use of my services and who are not attempting to claim the bounty on my head. Is that not enough for now?